Hey guys, John V from PhoneArena here. You're watching our video review of the Google Nexus 6. So this year's Nexus smartphone is a very different one from last year's Nexus 5. That's because the Nexus 6, which is being made by Motorola this time, is a more premium offering. It's no longer a cheap, affordable smartphone. Instead, it's a bigger, better, beefier spec thing. You have things like a 6-inch Quad HD display, you have the Qualcomm Snapdragon 805 processor, 3 gigabytes of RAM, and naturally it gets treated to Android 5.0 Lollipop, which is the biggest overhaul to the Google Android platform in recent memory. We know what's out there, there's a lot of competition. Where does the Google Nexus 6 stand? We're going to find out. Well, it's certainly nice that the Nexus 6 exhibits a more solid construction than the Nexus 5 from last year, but at the same time, the design isn't original just because it looks exactly like a stretched out version of the Moto X. Everything about its design resembles the Moto X, and we mean everything from the metal trim bezel that outlines the sides, which gives it a nice contrast to other things like the subtle arc of its casing and the plastic body. It's pretty much identical, with the exception that it is just longer, wider, and of course a lot tougher to hold with one hand. Obviously, this is a phone we've seen before in the Moto X, so the design isn't original, but nevertheless, it's just nice to see that the Nexus line exudes a premium construction once again, though its size puts it into that phablet category. Seeing that it follows the design language of the Moto X to the tooth, it has all the same ports and buttons in the same spots. And just like the Moto X, it even has two front-firing speakers, but unlike the Moto X, it's actually able to emit audio through both of them for music. Even now, there aren't too many phones with Quad HD displays, so the Nexus 6 is an elite crew with its impressive 5.96-inch 1440 by 2560 Quad HD AMOLED display. It really has a lot of sharp details thanks to its pixel density mark of 493 pixels per inch, and so detailed that it's even tough to decipher individual pixels when we look at it very closely. Now, beyond the resolution, everything else about the display is rather mute. For example, it produces a maximum 270 nits of brightness with its display, so it's kind of low, so it's very hard to view outdoors when the sun is present, and has that overly saturated color reproduction. It's not quite accurate, but at the same time, some people like that iridescent glow that's attached to it. In the greater scheme of things, it's nice that it is a Quad HD display, so you get that crisp look to it, but it doesn't quite stand at the top of the AMOLED kingdom, just because the Note 4, even with its similar Quad HD resolution, it exhibits a stronger brightness output and better color accuracy. Being a Nexus device and whatnot, the Nexus 6 is no doubt a showcase device for Google. It's the first smartphone to come out of the box with Android 5.0 Lollipop, the biggest overhaul to the platform in recent memory. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because we kind of covered all the features of the platform in our review of the Nexus 9. What I'm going to point out here is the principle of uniformity. By that, when we look at the Nexus 6 and check out the Android experience here, and we look at the Nexus 9, we notice that the presentation, the visuals, the animations, and even the set of features are identical. So when you move from one device to the other, it shouldn't be too bad because everything about them are the same. Android 5.0 Lollipop is tremendous for its refinements. It's a step ahead of the competition in the mobile space, and it's by far the most complete and comprehensive mobile experience out there. So there are few things I'm going to talk about here with the Nexus 6. The first one being the material design, which is the design language that Google has gone with the UI. Well, with that, you get these bright, vivid colors, some crisp looking text, and this layered design concept where things go on top of one another, and it just makes for a very seamless and modern look to it. The second thing I'm going to talk about is the support for multiple users with Android 5.0 Lollipop. Now, that's something we've seen already with tablets in Android 4.2 Jelly Bean, but this is the first time it's coming to the smartphone experience. So now if you have a family and multiple people are going to be using your handset, you could set up different accounts for all the people in your household, so they have their own set of personalization options, even multimedia content. And finally, the last feature I'm going to talk about is pinning. It's a very neat feature with Lollipop that locks the phone to a particular application. So for example, if I want to lock, the phone to the Chrome application, I could do that by tapping on this pin button. Now what that does is that someone else comes along, tries to use the phone. Let's say they want to borrow your phone to search the web, but they want to do something else. They can't because they're locked into this application. So if I hit the home button, it's going to tell me that it can't be done. You have to hold down the back and the task switch menu to actually unlock it. We'll be the first ones to say that Android 5.0 is impressive. It's a cut above the rest out there. It's intuitive, it's sleek, modern, and has just a lot of features that really makes the experience so compelling. But for a phablet, the Nexus 6 isn't that great just because we don't see any enhancements that really make good use of the screen, like the Note 4, which has things like true multitasking with its multi-window feature. You have also the advantage of all the interaction with the S Pen. This one here doesn't. The Android 5.0 Lollipop is stock, of course. It's a great platform for a regular smartphone, but not so much when it comes to a phablet. We know that the Nexus 6 is a future-proof phone just because it's packing the latest chipset from Qualcomm's camp. It's a quad-core 2.7 GHz Qualcomm Snapdragon 805 processor coupled with a pretty beefy 3 GB of RAM in the Adreno 420 GPU. Overall, the performance is what you'd expect. Very snappy, fast, very smooth too. Though every now and then, we sometimes see just a slight delay with certain operations. For example, if we press the home button to get back to the home screen, it doesn't sometimes do it instantly. There's just a second delay. It's not terrible, but it is noticeable. And on top of that, you could sleep soundly because it's pretty good at playing some of today's 3D intensive games. You can tell that the Lollipop keyboard changes here a little bit. Doesn't have those borders separating the individual buttons, but after a while practice, we get a feel for it. It's very responsive. We actually prefer using the portrait option more just because with the landscape one, we're doing a lot of stretching with our fingers. And as an alternative, you could even input text using the various swipe methods it has to offer. On the home screen, you'll find this icon for Create. When you tap on it, you'll be given access to things like Docs, Sheets, Slides, Drive, and Keep. It's just nice that you have light productivity available here with the Nexus 6. So if you're on the go, you want to create like a Word document of some sort, or create a slideshow, or even a spreadsheet, you have that ability. There's no longer a gallery application with Lollipop. Instead, all photos and videos are accessed through the Google Photos application. It's pretty intuitive just because you'll have some light editing tools available to you. So you could adjust things like the saturation, you could resize things, and even add some cool effects to them. Not surprisingly, the Nexus 6 works in other key areas, like surfing the web, just because you have a large high-resolution display which gives a lot of details. And on top of that, you have 4G LTE connectivity, so pages load up very quick. Navigational controls are pretty snappy and responsive. The music player here is your usual Google Play music application, so nothing different about it. The presentation's nice, the functionality is what you'd expect. As far as the audio quality, it has 2 speakers. It's nice that they project audio towards us, and it produces a pretty potent 75 decibels of audio power, so it's able to resonate deeply in places like small rooms and to an extent larger ones, but the bass is a little bit kind of reserved. And finally, it works well when it comes to watching videos, just because with its large display, smooth playback, we can't complain about the experience, with the exception that it would have been nice to see some sort of multitasking element with it. Even before snapping a shot with its camera, we were kind of leery and also apprehensive about its quality, just because the Moto X disappointed us with its camera. Now, the Google Nexus 6 is armed with a 13 megapixel autofocus camera, which features an f2.0 aperture lens. You have also optical image stabilization, the same dual LED flash ring of the Moto X, and you have up to UHD 4K video recording as well. As for the UI of the camera app, it's pretty simple. It's actually the Google camera application. What you get here are just some light shooting modes and no manual controls whatsoever. So those shooting modes consist of an HDR+, you have photosphere, panoramic, and lens blur. To our own relief, the results are favorable. That's a good thing, seeing that the Moto X disappointed us, and the quality kind of rivals that of the Droid Turbo. You get a fair amount of detail outdoors where sunlight is plentiful, and to an extent we could crop the photos later on without much loss to detail. It does actually a better job of handling exposure, so certain areas aren't too over or underexposed, so you have a very neutral look, and its color reproduction favors a slightly more subdued composition, but still pretty neutral and pleasant to the eye. Now, when we take it under lower lighting conditions, we're pretty happy too with the results. The photos are pretty bright despite the lack of lighting in the shot. It's not as bright as, say, an iPhone 6 or a Note 4, but it's pretty good, much better than the Moto X. You do see some digital noise creeping in the shot, which in turn, of course, kind of softens its quality, but still pretty good, and does a better job of capturing panoramic shots than the Droid Turbo. In addition, we're also pleased by its video capturing quality, both 1080p and 4K Ultra HD resolution. Overall, it captures, again, a lot of detail with 4K recording, so you'll be able to use that digital zoom without too much loss in detail. It also has optical image stabilization, so that ensures that our videos aren't too shaky. It's always pretty steady for the most part, and audio recording seems to be pretty solid. Our only complaint, though, is related to the autofocus. It just seems a little bit slow with that. Call quality with the Google Nexus 6 is for the most part passable. There are some opportunities, but generally speaking, you'll be able to carry conversations with it. The earpiece is pretty strong and powerful, enabling voices to sound audible, but there's some noticeable evidence of static in the background. And when we use the speakerphone, it's pretty strong, allowing us to discern voices in noisy environments, but it does exhibit a squeaky tone. Luckily though, our callers on the other end have a better time as they're presented with crisp tone voices. Likewise, its battery is good, but not great. It's stuffed with a 3220 mAh battery, and in our experience, that's able to get us through a solid 1 day of normal usage, or 8 hours of power usage, so no problems with that. In our own battery benchmark test, though, it achieves a rating of 7 hours and 53 minutes, which again is respectable considering the hardware it's packing along. But when you look at the Note 4, which also houses a 3220 mAh battery, that phone is able to deliver an hour longer with its battery life in our test. Luckily though, the Nexus 6 is also treated to wireless charging that's built in, and also has a turbo charger which allows us to charge its battery from 0 to 100 in under 100 minutes. If you have the money, there isn't any reason why you should think about getting the Nexus 6. It's a great all-around phone, and you have a premium offering at $650. It might seem a little bit expensive for anyone who's not used to buying a phone outright, especially if you're more interested in just getting contract phones. But when you compare that to some of its rivals, let's say like the iPhone 6 Plus or even the Note 4, the $650 is actually less than those two aforementioned smartphones. But at the same time, it doesn't get greeted to all the rich features you'd find in something like the Note 4, like the S Pen functionality and even all the software enhancements. But despite that, when you think about Android 5.0 Lollipop, it's a pleasure to behold. It's great. It's an all-around phone in the Nexus 6, and honestly, for the price point, it's not bad of an offering. At the end of the day, you're not going to be disappointed by what you get out of the Google Nexus 6. Like I said, it's a great all-around phone, and best of all, you're going to get the latest and greatest updates in terms of Android, so you can look forward to that. It's a wonderful smartphone for the features and functionality, but not quite a great phablet. So if you guys want to learn more about the Google Nexus 6, you could check out our website, PhoneArena.com. It's John V. Thanks for watching.